Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 351. Here on the first day of Black History Month, I am your host, Michael. Our normal compadres, Gail and Daniel. Gail will be late. Hopefully, we'll have Daniel join us on the show later on. But for now, we had him on the show. We had this brother on the show before. We have him back. Marquise of nyfights.com. He's recently moved on to there. What's going on, brother?
Pretty good, man. Just looking forward to the actual boxing fight schedule for 2022 that actually started at this point. Thankfully, it's on their way because this last month, man, was absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, really going on really from the last couple of months of 2021 and then the first month of 2022. It's been dry, but starting this weekend, things are going to start to heat up. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and blog/website discussing all things boxing. The model is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. For those who want to find out more information regarding the show, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us with your questions, comments, good or bad, you could do so at p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find links to what check us out all over the socials, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook /Meta, IG, Tumblr. Links to where you can donate. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. Let donation be the best nation. With tax season coming up, if you got some coin to spare, $1, $5, $2, it doesn't matter. Please shoot some my way if you have something to spare over. Help the overall production of things, particularly behind the scenes. And though I'm not a Beachbody coach for the time being, I stepped away for that. Schedule's too busy right now to concentrate on that. You can still check out Beachbody on demand. Take advantage of the 2-week trial throughout the year. 2 weeks, you got all access to Beachbody on demand, to the free workouts there. If you're interested in getting your body right, a new resolution for 2022. If you're looking for a boxing-based program, I highly suggest 10 rounds, 8-week boxing-based program, 3 days of cardio, 2 days of resistance/weightlifting, or any other programs on there. The 645, which dropped for the masses in December last year. The hardcore 6 weeks of the work, the OP90X series, bar blend, morning meltdown, which the ladies like. Whatever your particular goals are, Beachbody on Demand has it. Let's get things going. Going to be short recaps this week. Not that many fights since, like I said, it's been really light. Later half of 2021, early 22. Let's go to the junior lightweight division, to be specific, Marquise. Robson Conceicao made a lot of noise directly and indirectly in his fight against Oscar Valdez. I believe it was last September. Controversy going in as Valdez failed a drug test but was allowed to fight. And in the fight itself, Conceicao gave really good effort. I felt he beat Valdez that night, but Valdez ended up having his hand raised. The decision was him by unanimous. Conceicao, still big mad about that, has had his first fight since. Fought a previously undefeated Xavier Martinez. And for me, he had his shaky moments. He was hurt in the third, in the ninth, I believe it was, Conceicao, but he was pretty much in control. I think he ran away with it in the second half of the fight, won by decision. Afterwards, he says he has his eyes on unification bout between Valdez and Shakur Stevenson. We'll talk about that fight in a bit. But your overall impressions of Conceicao and his performance, and I know he says he wants Valdez. The question is, do you think he'll get it?
To start backwards, no, I think he has to wait to the back of the bus, or at some point he has to wait for the WBC to grant him that voluntary defense position again. It's going to be a long way for him. I know this was a title eliminator, but that clock's already went around already for that, so it's going to be a while for Conceicao in this. But I thought he looked really good against Martinez. Kind of concerned about Martinez. I thought Martinez, coming from the Mayweather Promotions, just signed with Top Rank, was going to just be the way his makeup was built up for Xavier Martinez. Michael, was that he's one of those fun TV fighters that just comes at you and just brings heavy hands. He didn't bring any of that at all with him this past weekend, and Conceicao was able to outbox him pretty much for about 30 minutes of this whole thing for the most part. I think the only round that I think Martinez may have stolen on these scorecards here, because they were pretty wide, I think may have been the second. But outside of that, this was pretty much one-way traffic, actually. It was to the point where you can hear it in the broadcast on ESPN. And it's the one thing I'll give ESPN credit for more often than not, because when their fights are pulling away and they don't want to be there, they check out. And Andre Ward checked out in this fight probably about the fifth round, saying, hey, he's not letting his hands go. I mean, until he does that, we can't say anything. That's kind of what happened with this fight. So, but I thought Conceicao looked really good. It's gonna be a while for him to get back to Valdez, but at the end of the day, it was all right.
I pretty much agree. I thought he beat Valdez the first time. If he let's just say he gets the fight. Let's just say Valdez fights Stevenson, beats him, and decides to give Conceicao a rematch. To me, he beat him that first fight. Unless Valdez shows something different, I think Conceicao will give him hell in the rematch. Valdez is, yes, he's undefeated, but he's flawed as all get out. And boxers, guys with hand speed and movement, always gives him trouble regardless. But again, I agree with you. I don't think that fight will happen. Not anytime soon. If the rematch with Valdez will happen anytime soon, if ever. Let's move on now to Ohio. Look, Don King is still around. Okay, he's still around, and he's still promoting shows. He had one in Warren, Ohio. The main event was Makabu. The
Ilunga Makabu. I got you.
Ilunga Makabu, the cruiserweight fight. His name has been popping up really all throughout 2021 as Reynoso hinted that Canelo Alvarez would move up from 68 to cruiserweight, entertaining a fight against Makabu. So this was in many ways kind of a showcase deal with Makabu as he fought a rematch against Mchunu. I admit I was covering another assignment for Three Kings Boxing, so I wasn't able to see this fight. Just seeing clips here and there. Makabu got the decision. He won the rematch. He won the first fight as well. And
yeah,
so I'm gonna lean heavily on you for this one, Marquise, because you was actually able to see it and you covered it for NY Fights, I believe.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on Makabu? How did he look? I had read that he called out Canelo after the fight. I don't think that fight will happen between him and Makabu, Canelo and Makabu. But do you think it will?
You know what? It depends on what version of Canelo we're going to get. If Canelo is chasing history, Michael, on this, and Makabu on Saturday night lost that fight flat out. There's no over if, ands, buts, split decisions, whatever you want to say about it. Pretty much, if anyone watching that fight Saturday night, pretty much even everyone ringside, I named up Carlos Trower here as well because he was there actually in Warren, Ohio for this debacle. He pretty much said Mchunu won this fight pretty much 8-4, which is what I had when I was watching on TV at home for the most part of the weekend for New York Fights. And when they read the scorecards and it was a split decision, it's like, oh boy. And you knew, Michael, that something was going to be bad with this scorecard decision because the fight was over and there was about a 10 to 15 minute delay in between waiting on the scorecards. And as you all know, Michael, anytime there's a delay on the scorecards that long, fuckery is afoot, and that's what we got in Makabu as retaining champion, the dead cruiserweight. And that's pretty much, and that's what it comes down to. Which honestly, this is bad on two fronts. For one thing, Makabu didn't look good at all. Like, this is one of those fights where I think if Canelo really is trying to chase this whole, first Mexican boxer to get, the belt in 5 weight classes, Makabu's the guy in the route to go, clearly, because he looked flat-footed. He didn't have any pressure. All he had was pressure for him. He didn't bring anything else from Mchunu. Mchunu was what had better conditioning, footwork, everything all on the board. The only thing that didn't go Mchunu's way was these questionable scorecards at the end. So it's one of those where I thought they need to at some point. And I wrote this for New York Fights. The WBC has to step in on this, Michael. And it annoys when boxing does this. WBC was all hell bent on replay and judges and we'll look back at tapes and stuff when it's convenient. They need to look like a tape on this crap. This was awful on Saturday, man. Like, this was not good. And it's one of those fights where Don King put this on. I mean, everyone saw the posters beforehand and everything leading up to it. Also, this was a $50 pay-per-view, by the way, and no, just no, man. I can't recommend this to anybody whatsoever. But you honestly, Michael, you didn't watch this Saturday night. You didn't miss anything.
Okay, I wasn't going to talk about this, but since you mentioned $50 pay-per-view and the debacle that this fight was,
yeah,
it seemed like the card was a debacle as well. What was worse, this fight or the undercard between quote unquote WBA champion, or at least a version of Trevor Bryant and his split decision win over a guy by the name of Guidry?
You know what? This main event was actually better than the actual. No. Actually, I'm lying. The co-main event was actually interesting because those guys were both throwing. Guidry, you can make an argument, may have won a couple more rounds in this fight card. I can see that fight being a draw, actually, truth be told, with Trevor Bryant. One thing about Bryant, which is I thought was really interesting more than anything else on this fight card, was, well, it's kind of the story for a lot of these guys in the main events. These guys were clearly had ring rust and were out of freaking shape, and that is it. There was no way around that. The camera couldn't hide it. Their footwork especially didn't either. So I thought the Brian Guidry fight was a little more interesting because at least Guidry was throwing at one point. The one thing with Guidry that he didn't have was he didn't have enough power or a jab to keep Brian off of him because he was giving about 30 pounds. But no, the co-main event was actually fun. The main event was what it was, but it was a higher level of boxing, however. But you can just tell that a lot of these guys on this fight card may have been called within the last probably after the holidays here for this fight card to take place at the end of the month.
I see Daniel has joined us. Daniel from For Boxing News and the Inscriber. I'm not going to troll him. I'm not going to make him talk about this Makabu Mchunu fight. I'm going to go back to the Conceicao fight against Martinez. Your thoughts on Conceicao, how he looked, as well as what's up for him possibly.
He looked about as well as you would expect, considering his fighting style. Yes, it's not exactly the most friendly fighting style. It's one of the reasons why I think even before everything came up, we pictured it was going to be an easy night for Oscar Valdez when he fought him. And then it turned out like, no, it's a little bit tricky. And it was the same case in this fight. It wasn't aesthetically pleasing, but it does show that he can be a problem of 130 style-wise, and he can probably throw opponents off with his style off the game plan, which is partly what you actually need when it comes into a fight like this. When you're trying to say to yourself and put to other people around you, particularly the sanctioning bodies, hey, I technically actually should have beaten this champion. Give me another chance to do it because otherwise we'll be hearing about another unification. Probably that Top Rank will probably be more happy with than the one that they're doing right now.
Like I said, light work in terms of recap. So let's go directly into the news. And we all know the big thing that popped off last week, and that is we finally the fight between Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte is finally going to happen. That's why we'll name this episode Things Are Starting to Clear Up, because things are starting to clear up vis-a-vis the heavyweight division. There was a purse pick that took place last week. I go to you on this one first, Marquise. Right. Record purse bid by Frank Warren outbid Eddie Hearn. Warren's bid was 41 million plus. Hearn bid 32 million. Hearn was talking about the purse bid is in the bag for him in Matchroom. Wrong. Warren won the bid. The fight is going to happen April 23rd. Looks like Wembley is the leading candidate. I've also heard of Cardiff as well. You can follow up as well, Daniel, your reaction to the fight, to the fact that it's finally being made, and as well as Frank Warren, to my surprise personally, given how Hearn was talking, ends up winning the purse bid.
You know, it's funny that old fish eyes, old Frank Warren here wins this purse bid, by the way, Michael. And it's really funny that he beats Hearn at his own game with this. And I'm trying to figure out on my end with Frank Warren personally, where'd the money come from? I mean, we can all sit here and use I'm gonna use the quotes here, MTK money coming in here, but let's be honest, guys. These Queensberry promotion cards that have been off during this pandemic, or at least the last year and a half, not very
Trash.
good. Not very good, and they've been ostracized out in Europe on BT Sport. They're now pretty much on Fight TV, like every other outlaw mud show program at this point. So it makes you wonder where the money comes from all this. But at the end of the day, they got the fight, and it's going to be with it's pretty much going to be with Fury and all that camp, and take on Dillian Whyte. Which, by the way, this fight really isn't as awful as I think it is. I don't think it's that competitive though, but I don't think it's as bad as it seems. It's one of those things where I think the WBC it doesn't want to pay for any more legal Zoom fees or any more arbitration shenanigans. I mean, they've been doing that for the last 2 years with the Fury Wilder 3 stuff as well. So it's like, all right. So they got this fight. They got this underway. I saw something about Whyte and them complaining about it. I'm sure they're going to sign the paper at the last hour like they usually do and complain on the way up to the bank. But no, I'm actually looking forward to this fight, actually. I don't think it goes long, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And essentially what I think may be Dillian Whyte's last stand here.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Your reaction to this muddled mess being finally cleared up.
Well, first off, wasn't Frank Warren broke at one point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why Marquise raised questions about where the money come from.
Yeah.
Did he hit Powerball? We didn't hear about that.
I'm guessing a combination of him, Aram, and all
secret partners. Silent partners.
Right.
Yeah.
So silent partners that will show you machinery if you don't return their investment.
Yeah.
and that front, but here's the situation when it comes into this. It had to be done.
Yeah.
It had to be done because this is one of the things that was holding up the heavyweight picture. As long as Fury was out there, not deciding or not mandated to actually fight, and with money involved, you had the situation with Usyk, you have the speculation with Joshua and step aside money, and you have even him have this speculation that Fury vacates the title, so that means Dillian Whyte versus Wilder for the vacant title. But luckily, this got resolved. A pretty decent payday for Tyson Fury if you say so, asking, considering it's an 80-20 split per WBC rules for the champion. So out of 41 million, he's getting 32, and Dillian Whyte's getting 8 million. That is probably going to be what Dillian Whyte's biggest payday. And it's good that it happened on this front. Like I said, gets Fury the way, it gets him focused, because we know what Tyson Fury is. If he's not a focused man, he'll do things to self-destruct, whether it's his own free will or not. And for Dillian Whyte, yeah, it's about time. It's about time. The man has literally, the last, 5 or 6 fights, maybe even 7 that he's had, have been a title eliminator one way or another. So he's been due this shot for a while. So it's a good, about time that he does it. Yeah, it's going to be pay-per-view, but with a $42 million purse bid, you better expect it to be pay-per-view. So it'll be good. It'll get it out of the way. Outside of a Hail Mary Steve Cunningham type shot, Dillian Whyte is not going to touch Fury. So this gets it out of the way. This puts Joshua Usyk rematch in full motion. So hopefully we'll have the actual undisputed fight this fall.
Give me a quick second. I see that Gail has joined us. Gail, also from nyfights.com, with the blonde beard, as her as the thumbnail.
My new mascot.
Right. I'll go to you. Your reaction to Fury Dillian Whyte finally a go.
I'm not horribly surprised. The fight itself is finally a go. I think we're all just agog at the price tag and trying to do the math, thinking, all right, how's Frank Warren going to get that money back? I mean, right, Marquis? How the hell is he going to get all that money back? I mean, you could be counting on insane pay-per-view numbers in the UK. You'll get some here. You certainly will. And, you know, Tyson Fury is practically an American heavyweight champion at this point, in spirit, if not in actuality. I mean, he's as close as we've got, let's face it. And it's going to be a fun fight in the fact that, I think the trash talk lead up will be epically good. I'm all about it. If it does, in fact, land on April 23rd, that is William Shakespeare's birthday, everybody. We got to lead it on that. That could be fun. All British fight. And certainly you can put 80, 85, 90,000 butts in a stadium in Great Britain with all that goes with that. Frank might just break even, but it's also just a big FU to everybody else he outbid. Price tag aside, he got that fight. And who's to say it doesn't land him some other big epic promotions down the road if he does a good job with this one. So, might have been an investment in some other things down the road. I don't hate this fight at all. Whyte's resume arguably is better than Wilder's. He has beat some serious opposition. In hindsight, looking back at his victory over Robert Helenius looks a whole lot better now than it did at the time. He handled himself quite well against Joshua up until he lost. He was arguably ahead till he lost. Well, you could say that with the Povetkin fight too, but truly he earned a huge payday. For Dillian, especially if this is his last one, I don't think he cares. I'm just dead curious what Tyson Fury is going to start doing with all that money up there in Henderson, Nevada. God knows. Maybe he'll buy himself a NASCAR team just like Floyd Mayweather just did.
I have no comments about Mayweather, his mascot, his NASCAR team. But questions. You're
not doing the Hot Wheel car?
No.
Questions.
It was a Hot Wheel car, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Even down to the blue sparkles on the hood, guys. That's a Hot Wheel machine. I had that as a kid. It's all right.
I like blue sparkles.
That is a literal micro machine come to life.
Yeah.
If you've got playing around money, what the hell? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, questions regarding how Warren got the money to make this bid aside. I'm glad the fight is happening. About damn time if you're Dillian Whyte and his fans. Will it do the 500,000 pay-per-view buys that Aram is predicting? I don't think so.
No.
But overall, I think it's a solid fight. I would make Fury the pretty prohibitive favorite going in, but Whyte has power and he's tough. And when you're a big man who can punch, you always have a chance. And we've seen Fury go down before, right? But I think Fury is also at the top of his game right now, and it's going to be difficult in terms of Whyte coping with the length and the jab, particularly if Fury, instead of bulldozing in like he did against Wilder, second, third fight, he decides to box a little bit more and comes in a little bit better shape. Yeah. It's not going to be the easiest proposition for one, Dillian and Whyte. Let's move on to some other matters, some other news event. And let me just say, with this fight being made, that pretty much assures that we will see a rematch between Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua. We talked about it last week, how Joshua was entertaining taking a step aside fee. Do we have the answer to that? He's going to fight Usyk again. That fight, that's one fight in terms of men's boxing, right? in the time between our last show and this particular episode, huge developments when it comes to women's boxing. Daniel, I'll start the conversation with you as Matchroom announced that, and I've been calling for this fight for a couple of years now. Matchroom has announced that Katie Taylor, undisputed lightweight champion, she's going to defend those belts against Amanda Serrano. Fight's going to happen April the 30th in NYC. Yeah, I'm ecstatic over this. Let's get the conversation. Let's get it started with you, Daniel. I couldn't be more happy.
First off, it's about time this fight actually got to the finish line. It's been talked about long enough. We know about what wound up happening the first time. Amanda backed out mainly due to money. And it was good to see that she's going to get a decent payday out of this. And like I said, I think I mentioned it. It is going to be in MSG, right? This is going to be Madison Square Garden. So you're going to have a really, really healthy house. You're going to have the Irish that come out of hiding in New York City, and obviously the ones that will travel from Boston to cheer for Katie. And then you'll pretty have at least 1/5 of the Bronx and 1/5 of Harlem in MSG to cheer for Serrano. So that's going to be a very lively event, a very, very interesting fight from a standpoint also, not only for ticket selling, but for skill. Katie Taylor is among the most skilled, if not the most probably skilled fighter in her weight class. However, she's facing somebody now in Amanda Serrano that has no problem moving weight classes. The weight classes don't affect her the way you would think somebody would affect it as much. It doesn't affect her. She does have a good knockout ratio when it comes to that. So Katie has to worry about that, particularly in the fights that she had with Pursuit. That took a lot out of her, whether she wants to admit it or not. And is somebody that has an actual chip on their shoulder for family reasons. Because Katie remembers what happened to her sister Cindy. That's how this all started. The talking back and forth, the way Katie beat Cindy. So that she's going to wind up carrying that chip in the shoulder. This is going to be Katie Taylor's best test to date. And I know there's a few months into that fight. People are going to be bouncing back and forth of who wins.
I am loath, Marquez, to talk about the YouTube fighters, but I have to give him, Paul, credit here for his work behind the scenes. Serrano has signed a deal with him, and it's being reported that she's going to make $1 million for this fight, right? So they're going all in on his side. It also with Matchroom in terms of Katie Taylor, historic in more than one way, in more ways than one, because you have arguably two of the top 3 women or in pound-for-pound fighters in women's boxing, or it could be argued the 2 top pound-for-pound fighters in women's boxing, depending on how you feel about Claressa Shields, who we'll talk about later on in the show. But this is the first time that that you're going to have 2 women, a women's bout, headlining a card at MSG. Daniel talked about how the Boricuas are going to show up, the Irish are going to show up, so the crowd is going to be pretty sizable. The promotion goes right. This shapes up to be not just a great fight, but just a huge, huge event overall. One of the biggest, I would argue, in 2022.
Yeah, and this is the biggest women's fight on paper until they mention Shields Marshall at some point sooner or later, which Eddie Hearn sounds like he's going to make at some point to end the year at this point, which I'm looking forward to also. But no, in terms of this fight being in New York, I would have thought this fight had UK written all over it. I think that may have been the sticking point, by the way, guys, the first time around with all of this, because this fight originally, this Taylor Serrano fight, was destined for Hearn Square Garden during this pandemic, and that all got 86'd out. So Now that all smoke's cleared away, new management for Serrano means we got this fight on the courtesy of Jake Paul and MVP Promotions or whatever that is. I'm actually looking forward to this fight as a whole because the way Hearn is setting it up is looking like it's going to be actually a pretty solid event, and it's going to remind me a lot of when they had Joshua Louise in 2019 in New York at MSG, and how big of an event that was. The concern I have for Eddie Hearn, of course, is it could be just like that event with Joshua Louise in 2019, where arguably, and Daniel mentioned Katie Pursoon the first time. You can mention Duffy Pursoon. I mean, you can make the case that she won that first fight easily, and that was in MSG, along with the other upsets that matchroom fighters had, i.e. Anthony Joshua, i.e. Josh Taylor. I had I think a draw against the real Ray Robinson. You know, that fun stuff. You know, wasn't exactly the best night for matchroom fighters on that card, by the way. So hopefully history doesn't repeat itself on that part of it. But in terms of this fight and women's boxing, this thing is huge. This is the fight that people were thinking when Claressa Shields was calling out Layla Ali would be. This is on that level of scale where you got the biggest women in the sports. And to piggyback your point, Michael, you mentioned two of the top three. Claressa Shields mentioned, I think, last week that she's not hating on this fight, and she's willing to say it's a bigger thing than anything she has going on. So it's the top two.
Let's get into the actual fight itself, Gail. Early diagnosis here. Both are par excellence. Both are highly accomplished. Both can box. Both can slug it out when need to. Mm-hmm. It can be argued that Serrano, I would throw in Senicia Estrada as well, are the two highest skilled ladies in the game. Serrano is a fighter who can basically do it all. We've seen what Taylor can do. The question for me is, one, can Serrano deal with the size of the bigger Taylor and the grit that she fights with, right? Conversely, can Taylor deal with the skill set of a Serrano, a fighter she's never faced that kind of style before? So kind of here in February, an early breakdown of that fight, please.
The way I see it going, Michael, just also looking
up. Okay, that was for Gail, but that was for Gail. My bad, Daniel. Unmute your mic, Gail.
Breakdown of the fight. First of all, whoever wins, in my mind, is without a doubt number one pound for pound. Number one, because of beating the other. None of the other women have been tested like whoever the winner here is. And let's hope it's the first of several fights, if it's good enough. Having seen Taylor have so many problems with Delphine Pursoon in their first fight, that speaks really well to Serrano's opportunity as a strictly offensive fighter who has certainly very responsible defensive skills, but she's all about power. She is a legitimate knockout artist as a woman. If they had 3-minute rounds, she would arguably be a knockout threat in every fight she's in, and her percentage is still extremely high for women at 2 minutes. So Taylor is going to have to fight very smart, not make any mistakes. I think Serrano's upside, despite being slightly smaller, is extremely high. And let us also remember, Taylor, has been around quite a while. Taylor is in her late 30s. She's not a youngster. She still looks good, but boy, in the last couple of fights, I don't know about you guys, I've seen a little bit of her age.
Slippage. Yeah.
I mean, she's at such a high level, it's proportional, but she still is on the downside. To me, Amanda's catching her at exactly the right time, at exactly the right point of her career, both in and out of the ring. Say what you will about Jake Paul, but I give him all the credit in the world for giving her the platform that's helped launch her this final step. And I love the setting. You're going to have massive crowds backing both Taylor and Serrano. I like an arena where there are an equal number of fans going after each other as they cheer their fighters on. And truly, since we never had, the big fights that we wanted in the Christy Martin era, right? Mm-hmm. I really would call this the biggest fight in women's boxing history. No doubt.
I tend to agree. And April 30th is going to be a theme in terms of the news segment because that's shaping up to be quite the night in the sport overall. I believe Matchroom has announced that Franchon Cruz, she's going to be fighting in a unification bout against the IBF champion. Her name escapes me. Is that going to be on the same card? Help me out here. Is that going to be on the same card as this?
Yep.
On the undercard of Taylor Serrano?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's going to be the supporting bout along with Jesse Vargas and the Liam Smith card got rescheduled to it as well. So Hearn is actually stacking this card. Hearn's actually stacking this card. I'm actually excited for this for once because I'm so. Yeah. We've seen so many of these actual cards with like just questionable.
Sideros.
Yeah. Who really doesn't quite have the best resume in the world, but she's still a very credible opponent. And what a good platform for Franchon Cruz DeZern, who, believe me, knows how to sell a fight. So she is a women's fighter. A lot of Americans know. That's also going to bring out an East Coast fan base who might not completely be tied to either Taylor or Serrano. So I think it's a brilliant lineup. I really do.
Yeah, indeed. We were talking about this before. Hit that live button, and you were mentioning, Marquise, that Hearn is really stacking his card. He has no choice given the fact that he just lost the purse bid for Fury Whyte. He got to make some adjustments somehow.
Well, he's got to spend that money somewhere.
Right. So this is
it's hard to start that GoFundMe if you just try to put up $32 million purse bid out there.
Right. So this is I'm not mad at the alternative if it ends up with this kind of card. I mentioned the 30th also happening on the 30th as well. We talked about Oscar Valdez winning our breakdown of Conceicao's win over Xavier Martinez. Also mentioned Shakur. Well, Valdez and Shakur are going to fight a unification bout at 130. Valdez WBC champion, Stevenson WB. I can't remember the locale of the fight, but it's going to happen on the 30th, and I'll go back to you on this one, Gail. I like the fight, but I mentioned in our discussion about Conceicao how Valdez has trouble with boxers who can move and who are intelligent. I still feel I'll die on this hill and say that Valdez lost the fight to Conceicao. I think Stevenson I believe Stevenson is a higher level than Conceicao. Kudos to Valdez for taking the fight because I didn't know if he would go for it straight away. But based on what I've seen from Stevenson, based on his dominant performance against Jamel Herring, as it stands right now on February 1st, when we're recording this, I make Shakur heavy favorite here. I just don't see anything that Valdez can do outside of power. Landing the left hook, outside of that, nah, because he can't outbox him. That's for damn sure.
But he does have the power to hurt Stevenson. So again, somebody in that position is always a threat. Stevenson, I agree. I would certainly consider the favorite, but I'm not sure I'd go to the overwhelming favorite like you are. I think Valdez can rely on Eddie Reynoso to put together a very smart plan. Now, he'd have to follow it. That's always an issue. Most brilliant plan in the world goes nowhere if the fighter can't execute it in the ring. But I trust that Reynoso will know what needs to be done. And then the interesting part of this will be to see if Valdez can get it done. If not, Stevenson can make this a very tactical fight and I think win fairly easily. Let's see how his pride drives him in this. Is it going to be one of these things where he wants to have a flashy fight and decides to engage with Valdez? Probably not the smartest thing for him to do, but sometimes the boxing ego takes over and he's going to want to put on a show. We'll see. And so both need to be disciplined in different ways to win this fight.
Quick analysis of this fight early on, Marquise and Daniel.
You know what? I'm thinking this fight's going to be a lot closer than I think, guys. And I'm going to piggyback Gail here. And I may say this because you mentioned the word tactical, which is my biggest fear in this contest, guys, because I think this may set up to be exactly that. Because we're at the mercy of trying to figure out what version of Shakur Stevenson we're going to get. Are we getting to one? I was there ringside in Atlanta to see him style on Jamel Herring for 10 rounds. That was impressive. Before that, he's been doing the things like, against Toka Cleary and everybody else, and then Nakatili and the ever snooze fest that he's been putting out there lately. So I'm intrigued on that. And the big thing with Valdez that I want to know is what version of Valdez are we going to get as well? The one that surprised us and upset Burchelt, or the one that had trouble against Adam Lopez and Conceicao, as you mentioned. So it's really a closer fight than what the paper looks out to be. I'm looking forward to seeing what version we're going to get of these guys. That's pretty much what will determine all of this at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's going to be a tactical contest, and this may stack up to be one of the more boring unification matches, but interesting boxing nonetheless.
Here's my problem in terms of Valdez. The Burchelt fight made to order for him, hindsight being 2020, because Burchelt largely came at him like a bull in a china shop. Made the fight easy for Valdez. He didn't have to do much. He just had no choice. He all he had to do was just stay disciplined, keep the jab going, and be wary of the power. And Burchelt at times can telegraph punches. You can see him if you have distance. Not going to be the case here with Shakur. Not going to be the case. At his best, he hits pretty hard, but more importantly, he is hard to hit. And he's not going to let his punches go unless he sees them. He's not going to throw blindly in there. So he's going to be able to see everything that Valdez do. And if he's able to see everything that Valdez do, it's going to pose problems for Oscar. I'll go to you on this one, Daniel.
That's the main thing when it comes to measuring this fight, because from a skill standpoint, even before the Herring fight, you would feel you probably side with Shakur based on that. Based on if Valdez gets presented with a different situation, he'll revert to what he was before showing a little bit in the Burchelt fight. The problem's going to be when it comes to Stevenson, though, is Stevenson, unfortunately, has this tendency to get into a lull if he sees a fight that technically that he should win easily. He may get into a lull, and that may all that Valdez will need to land that left hook. And we have to make sure, because we never really seen Stevenson be hurt, at least in this weight class. So if Valdez is able to land that left hook because Stevenson decided to get into a lull, that's going to show a lot what's going to come out of it. So there's always a chance, but Stevenson right now, based on skill, has to be the favorite, barring Valdez, like Marquis mentioned, barring Valdez following the Reynoso plan to a T, which unfortunately with fighters is almost always impossible.
One more bit of news, and if you have any more news developments in the panel, please provide them in the private chat. Interesting developments here at middleweight, particularly when it comes to the WBO, as Demetrius Andrades, who was mandated to fight mandatory contender challenger at the time, Janabek Alakanuli. Bubu Andrade has decided to vacate the belt. He's going to move up to 68 to fight in basically an eliminator, going to fight in an eliminator in hopes of gaining mandatory status and inch himself closer to a fight of Canelo. Alakanuli, he's going to fight for the interim belt at 160 pounds. The question is, for the panel, your thoughts on Andrade's decision to vacate and move up to 68. I know folks will claim, suggest, infer, imply that he's doing this to avoid Alakanuli. I think kind of the opposite. I'm not mad at him for trying to land, for moving up to try to position himself to fight Canelo. He's been calling him out, hell, since both of them were at 154 pounds. He's wasted a lot of his career. He needs a big fight. He wants a big fight. Why not shoot for it while you can? Alan Cannoli, very good fighter that a lot of people don't know about. But what do you want? Do you want him to try to shoot for Canelo or stay in the mud at 160 pounds? For me, again, I'm just not upset at this decision to move up to 168 pounds, try to land a fight with Canelo if he can get it. Your thoughts?
No, I'm not against this at this point. At this point, guys, I'm kind of convinced. What took Boo Boo so long to get rid of this stupid belt? I mean, no one was going to fight him with this belt in his hand. So at some point or another, he has to either move, as the old expression saying goes, guys, shit or get off the pot. And Andrade is getting off the pot here. So, and the one thing I think that's really of note of this, more importantly, people are saying that he's ducking Janibek. Really, it's more of the opposite, as you mentioned, Michael. It's more of Bob wants his WBO super middleweight belt back, and he was going to win this purse bid, guys. And I'm pretty sure Andrade didn't want to be stuck, fighting on ESPN Plus in another mandatory defense that's not going to improve his resume and his career. So his best bet is to drop this belt, go up to 168, which I think he was talking about doing beforehand anyway during this pandemic at one point. Try to face Zach Parker or whoever is in the wasteland of 168 to try to position himself as a stepping stone here. But once again, there's so many people just waiting on what Canelo is going to do. Isn't Canelo still golfing right now? I mean, you got keep it moving until that whole thing sorts itself out. But I have no problem with Boo Boo getting rid of this belt at this point. It was a matter of if and when at this point. But I'm looking to see what he does at 168 at this also as well.
Yeah, Boo Boo's going to fight Zach Parker for mandatory status at 168. Cannoli is going to fight Falcoa for an interim title at 160 pounds. There's a scenario there where Andrade could beat Parker and he could still hold on to the title, to the middleweight title, if he so chooses. I don't think so.
I hope he does it. I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't do what Leo Santa Cruz is doing with that WBA belt that's holding in his garage next to his high school photos at this point, just holding golden dust.
Yeah. That's a joke. I'll go to you, Daniel Gale. Your thoughts on Andrade's decision to move up to 168?
Honestly, it was the only logical move he was going to make, because either do this, use, like you mentioned, WBO rules, use those rules to your advantage. Use it, say like, okay, I'm the champ. I was the champion 160. I'm moving up. Make me the mandatory. So then, barring Canelo moving up to light heavyweight, which, let's be real, it could still happen, then Canelo at one point doesn't have a choice if he wants to defend those titles. So it makes sense from that standpoint. It makes sense to the fact that as Boo Boo's getting older, it was gonna be tough for him to make that weight. And we also have to look into the fact that he wasn't going to get any other fights, unfortunately, in 160. He wasn't going to get Maul. He wasn't going to get Triple G. So unfortunately, the tables are set for that to be the only thing. I'm glad he's doing it. See what happens when it comes to Canelo, because, like I said, Canelo could easily just say, I'm going up to light heavyweight. And then that frees up the entire situation for super middleweight.
What say you, Gail?
All of the above. Yeah, it's a good move for him. I don't think Canelo's going to touch him, frankly. I think he's a mess. He's not a draw. He's more problem than he's worth. But if what we believe may be true, that Canelo is going to take Charlo on, assuming Canelo wins, so maybe Andrade takes on Charlo after Canelo does, or if Canelo does not, Andrade is waiting in the wings for that fight But I do think he's better off in the 168 landscape. And he may have been watching Canelo clean things out and thought, I can do at least that well. I can beat at least these guys. I would not hate seeing him fight somebody like Caleb Plant. I get that there's a promotional divide there that's a problem. But of the also rans at this point at 168, I don't hate that fight. I really don't hate that fight. And it could be positioned as a really interesting regional rivalry if somebody was smart enough to do it. Of course, it's boxing, so don't count on anybody seeing that. But I think that could absolutely happen.
I don't know if it will. I don't know if this fight could happen, but let's just say Andrade wins the eliminator, right? Canelo decides to vacate. It's a dangerous fight for Andrade, but I would love to see him fight Benavidez for, say, the vacant BC title at 68.
What? That isn't a bad fight. It's just, I mean, it's just 168 guys, as we all know. It is a plethora and a who's who of not very good. I mean, the short list, what is it? Benavidez, Plant, Morrell, I guess. I mean, after that, I mean, the drop off falls off a cliff, I think. Hate to say it, guys. I think Zach Parker actually is top 15 in 168, which is not very good. And I've seen Zach Parker on several fights, which really isn't very good. But the Benavidez fight's intriguing. I'm just intrigued on what is Andrade's endgame from here, because he has to cross some sort of street somehow, some way, and clearly the way through Bob's organization with the WBO isn't working yet. So I don't know.
There's Charlo. It's Charlo out there, but I don't think Charlo will ever fight him. Even if let's just say Charlo doesn't land the fight with Canelo, I don't think Charlo will ever fight Andrade. I just don't think he'll do it.
No, I think that ship has sailed, and why I don't know, but I think it's just gone, and it's kind of sad actually. Like, why is this guy so avoided this much to the point of no return? It's kind of disturbing, but I just don't know if at this point it's because the mismanagement of Andrade for his career for this point, or just the fact that, let's be honest, guys, some of these Andrade fights are really, really unwatchable. Like that's the lucky fights on YouTube if you guys feel frisky. I mean, buyer beware.
Yeah, that's the bad part of this. If you're trying to do the fight Benavidez is interesting, but that requires cooperation without Heyman. And if you can't get him to cooperate to unify with Maul, very, very rarely that you're going to get a level of cooperation when it comes to Benavidez, especially since it seems like they're going to probably position Benavidez. If they don't get Charlo, they're going to position Benavidez as their horse to get into Canelo. And like I said, if Maul doesn't get it, which is still a very good possibility. But this is where we're at. This is, unfortunately, Andrade, a lot of these things has nobody to blame for himself. When he was ready to go on Showtime, fight Mel for the WBO Junior Middleweight title and put himself in that stratosphere, he decided to listen to Jay-Z instead. That has cost him fights. That has cost him millions of dollars. And it ultimately has put his career in a direction that, barring a Canelo super fight, he'll never recover from financially.
One more news bit of order before we go down and break down fights, and I'll just preface by let everyone know here, because there's so many fights in the docket this weekend, I'm going to split these between one person. I'm not going to have everyone talk about every fight because that would be too time consuming, right? But a few shows back, we recapped Joe Smith Jr., his stoppage win was a fraud. And at that time, the word was that Smith is, I know it sounds like a fraud, and I just make it sound like that he's is Graffard, G-E-F-F-A-R-D. It sounds like I said fraud, like he's an actual fraud, F-R-A-U-D. My apologies for that. But anyway.
I mean, you weren't completely wrong.
in the aftermath, there was talk of a fight between Smith and Beterbiev, possibly late this spring, early this summer. There's been some developments on there that the fight is close to being finalized. I'll go to anybody here on the panel who wants to pick it up. Do you have any updates in terms of ongoing negotiations for that bout?
Latest I saw, unfortunately, is what Coppinger put out. So take that for what it's worth. And I have a problem when Coppinger does this because everything he throws out, whatever it involves money or location, always seems to be going elsewhere every single time. You can set your watch and your food to it. So supposedly that his story on ESPN supposedly is a dispute over $300,000 allegedly, which I. Be honest with you guys, I think that's cap, but whatever. Nonetheless, that's the fight that they're supposed to be. But my thing I've heard for the longest though was that Beterbiev didn't want to fight Joe Smith. I've always heard that from his camp for years at this point. That's before the pandemic and everything else. So we'll see what happens with that. It's a fun fight if it actually happens. It needed to happen already. By the way, they're on the same freaking promotional banner. They have the same freaking pokes. I don't know why. I have such a hard problem when it comes to in-house fights like this and they're arguing over money where it's like there's already a budget. It's Top Rank. It's ESPN. You know what you're getting. You know what you're guaranteed. Sign the paper. Deal with Bob yelling at you. Hope you win and move on. It's like it is what it is with that. So
yeah. At this point, as you said, Marquise, they're both in-house fighters. It shouldn't be that difficult to make. Arguing over $300K. Cap, as you said, I don't believe it. Sounds petty to me. Iron the shit out and make it happen. Good fight on paper. Both guys can hit. Both guys are vulnerable. It should be a barn burner for how long as it happens. Let's just get the thing finalized and have it a go, right?
Yeah,
because it's a good fight.
It is a good fight, and like Mike, you got to mention on to it is. Beterbiev is one of the front runners in the Canelo sweepstakes, and Joe Smith is a dark horse in the Canelo sweepstakes. So they may be starting negotiations while they're talking to Mr. Reynoso and seeing what deal can actually work better for them. Because as far as the fight between them goes, I can see how Beterbiev's camp doesn't want to fight Joe Smith because as unfortunately as his body is deteriorating from a boxing standpoint over time, Beterbiev needs to have opponents with him that can't take his power and cannot out-tough him. And Joe Smith may be the guy that won't beat him from a skill standpoint, but could probably out-tough him in a fight. And if you have that, you have somebody that's younger, somebody that's more livelier, and somebody in Joe Smith, if you talk to him, humble guy, one of the nicest people you'll meet. But when he's in the ring, he's there to prove a point. And that I can see why Beterbiev's camp doesn't want to do that. So we just have to see if we hear any announcement of Canelo within the next week, which to me, it's either going to be Beterbiev or Bivol. That's where all the other chips going to fall.
Canelo needs to make up his mind and stop being a diva and and holding everybody on the string like that.
He's the money guy. He's earned it.
He's Canelo.
He's the mountain man. He controls the whole schedule, and
that's why he's on the links.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, it's nice out here in San Diego. You can play lines, and he can play. He's no dumbass. He lives out here because you can play golf on a different golf course, especially if he cares to go down to Baja as well as, out to the desert. He can play a different damn golf course pretty much every damn day of the year, and it's going to be 75 degrees no matter what. It's the life, man. It's the life. And you know what? He earned it. Fair enough. The problem between Smith and Beterbiev is they're both saying, well, yeah, we need to have a fight, but neither of us wants to stub our toe before we might get to Canelo. So yeah, everybody's it's like, did you ever, when you were a little kid, do a game at a carnival or something called a cakewalk? So it's sort of like musical chairs, except you walk around in a circle, and if you land on the square with the lucky number, you get the prize, the cake. Well, everybody's doing the Canelo cakewalk right now, waiting for their lucky number to come up. And they're just kind of strolling around slowly, waiting for that number. And they don't want to take a fight before then, even if they think they're going to win, because they could win a fight and get injured and lose the opportunity, or they could actually lose and lose the opportunity. And they're screwed. Anybody, seriously, at this point, anyone between, I think 160 is a thing of the past, except for the, potential of Golovkin. And I think that fades with every day. So everybody from 168 to, for Pete's sake, 200 is in the Canelo sweepstakes at this point. Everyone in the pool.
Oh man, remember that?
Yeah, but who wants to see him in Makabu? Come on.
Already beat the snot out of. That's about it.
That's so funny. You mentioned the car. Yeah, it's so funny, Gail. You mentioned the Carney game, because that's kind of how boxing kind of is with a lot of this stuff at this point, because everyone's in the same holding pattern, waiting on what Canelo's going to do. And in the meantime, these guys could be doing something like, oh, I don't know, fighting each other, but
right.
Nonetheless.
Damn,
crazy concept. I know.
Thank goodness we have so much competition in the weight divisions from welterweight on down, who are just raring to go. And it seems like the further down you drop, in weight, the more action we're getting. So bravo to all of you smaller men and the ladies keeping us entertained.
Let's move on. Yeah. Let's move on to fights that's happening this weekend. And let's start off with the Fox pay-per-view card in Las Vegas for the $74 and the return of Mr. One Time himself, Keith Thurman. I'll get things started off with you, Daniel. Look, he's making his return. First fight since the defeat to Pacquiao, subsequent surgery, fighting Mario Barrios, who himself is coming off of a stoppage loss to Gervonta Davis at 140 pounds. A lot of people are looking to see how Thurman looks in his return. How do you think he will fare in this fight? I think he's too big and too strong for Barrios. If he's the fighter that we saw against Pacquiao, he was coming off of a layoff then. If we see that version, I feel that he will beat Barrios. But if Thurman is somehow close to his best, he has a chance to stop Barrios. I think the prevailing thing for me is I see Thurman making a successful return Saturday night in Vegas. What say you, Daniel?
Yeah, and you have to take into account of the fact that Thurman, luckily, in the multi-year span that he has not fought, has not let himself go. He hasn't gone down and eaten a whole bunch of checkers, getting fries, and just let himself go. He has maintained himself in shape, even if he's not training for a fight. He's kept himself in pretty decent shape throughout this gap, and luckily now that may have helped him in training camp get a little bit more in rhythm. Now, the situation is going to be, though, how are you mentally? Because that is the game plan where you fall into. You can be as good as you can physically, but if you're not in there mentally, and he might not be, considering how he lost to Pacquiao, it may stay with him in the fight, and that may actually help Barrios, who has proven in the tank fight that he is a fighter that will gut it out. And even though I don't think he'll win, because I think to me it's a situation of Thurman being too big and being too skilled to have Barrios land the punch that he needs to hurt him at least. If he does a well good enough outing, he can position himself to be in the same space that you have an Adrian Granados, a Josecito Lopez at the PBC. Serviceable guys can win, can pull an upset once in a while, but they're never really going to be in the top echelon of the weight division. But this is a good test for Thurman. It's also a good safe choice because you're not risking the possibility of your comeback fight being knocked out, which would have been the case if you tried to pick some of the young kids, whether it would have been Ennis or even Virgil.
On the undercard here, Marquise, you have the return of Leo Santa Cruz. As we know, Santa Cruz, multiple division world champion. The last time we saw him in the ring, he basically got took out one-hitter quarter style by, again, the aforementioned Gervonta Davis, Halloween 2020. He's moving back down to featherweight, fighting a guy by the name of Keenan Carbajal, who I honestly don't know much about. If you can provide some insight on him, please do. But your thoughts on the return of Leo Santa Cruz?
I'm intrigued to see what version of Santa Cruz we're going to get with this at 130, and because the guy he's facing in Keenan Carbajal, who's linked to Michael Carbajal, but if you read the press releases, he is not associated with him, and I think Carbajal is going to be in Santa Cruz. That whole camp is going to be going out with Santa Cruz for that fight actually this weekend, which I think is pretty funny. It's a weird family dispute going on with all of that, but behind the scenes. But in terms of Santa Cruz in this fight at 130, supposedly this is his last fight at 130. He's supposedly going to move back down in weight and face the winner of Lee Wood and Michael Conlon. And if you guys believe any of that, I got bridges to sell you and lotto tickets as well. But nonetheless, that's what's going on for the most part with this fight. I think it's going to just be another boring Leo Santa Cruz fight. I mean, we've seen these fights before with Leo where he'll sit and punch and throw 1,000 punches in like the Miguel Flores fights and whatnot, and nothing really happens, and he just wins on a white decision. I think that's what this is again. And I'm in the camp, guys. I'm still salty at Santa Cruz because we were all denied that third fight with Carl Frampton, and now I have to sit and listen 4 years after the fact that he's going to go back down to that same weight class and defend the belt finally after Frampton retired. It's like, all right. So, nonetheless, I don't know, guys. I'm convinced, honestly, if PBC really want to sell this card better than what they're doing now, it's not have Keith Thurman, talk his ass off what he's been doing for the last 6 weeks. It just label it as a banner, watch it.
6 weeks
unite.
6 weeks. In terms of Thurman, what about 6 years?
Because it feels like 6 years.
Fighting. Yeah. So, and we would deny the third fight between Santa Cruz and Frampton, and we've also been denied Santa Cruz and Gary Russell Jr. Even after Gary Russell Jr. used Santa Cruz's dad as a prop
at the barbershop. Yeah,
about him. So I'm still side-eyeing him about that. On the same card as well, you're going to have Luis Neri fighting him. That's going to happen in Las Vegas on the same night. In Phoenix, Gale on the zone. My candidate for this is the fight I'm looking forward to this weekend. Looking forward to the most as Carlos Cuadras. He was set to fight Srisakat Sorwangvasai for the vacant WBC belt at 115 pounds, right? Well, earlier this week, news broke that Sorwangvasai has tested positive for COVID and had to withdraw from the fight. Filling in for him is a fighter we've talked about here before, Jesse Bam Rodriguez. Rodriguez ranked number 1 and 3, respectively, by the sanctioning bodies at 108 pounds, but insiders like ourselves hold him in high regard as a prospect, emerging contender. Think he's a legit talent. He's moving up from 105 to 115 pounds to fight Cuadras, and it's a fight I really want to see. A lot of people not in the know will say, okay, he's moving up 2 divisions. How will he fare? I personally think this is kind of right time for Bam. It's a gamble for sure, but if you're going to do it, why not do it now against a Cuadras who can be argued not the fighter that he once was I'm fascinated by this fight, Gil. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is such a lucky break for us, the fans. I feel terrible about Rungvisai being taken out by COVID. Damn, the pandemic still gets a say over our fight schedule, as we unfortunately know. But boy, talking about pulling one out of your anatomy, this is a great matchup. And it is not all that unlike, you know, a young Canelo testing himself against Floyd. Now, I'm not saying Carlos Cuadras is Floyd Mayweather. I'm saying that you have a young, aspiring fighter, very, very talented. He's 14-0, 10 knockouts. He's 22 years old, going up against Cuadras, who's a veteran of, 44 fights, 45 fights. I'm not entirely sure his age, but he's certainly a lot older than Rodriguez. And Rodriguez is the half brother of Joshua Franco. He's trained by Robert Garcia in fairly early in his career. Garcia actually, completely unprompted, said the best fighter in his entire stable was Bam Rodriguez. And everyone sort of reared back, almost like a bad cartoon or that meme that has everyone going, "Oh, what? What?" leaning back, right? And he was absolutely serious. This is a couple of years ago. He was being interviewed about something else entirely, and he said, "Oh, the most talented guy in my stable is Bam Rodriguez." Robert Garcia has seen a lot of guys come and go out of his gym. And he's seen a lot of people across the ring. And for him to just spontaneously say, "This is the guy, this is the winner," that impresses me. So what if Rodriguez loses at this point? Has that stopped Cuadras from being a draw, Rungvisai from being a draw, Chocolatito from being a draw? Shall I go on? These guys are all willing to fight. They get it on multiple times. Not one of these fights has been less than entertaining, no stinkers, and some of them have been absolutely spectacular. How great for Rodriguez to get in on this carousel ride with the rest of these guys and announce himself in the main event at 22 all of a sudden. Good for him. And I'm not worried about him stepping up in weight at all. I think this could be a big, pleasant surprise for a lot of people.
I'm putting my cards on the table right now. I want to say Bam is going to do it. I say he's going to beat him. Again, it's a gamble. Cuadras is durable, but Cuadras has shown himself to be vulnerable in his last few fights. He was stopped in his most recent bout against Estrada. I think Bam will be able to carry the power and the speed up from 108 to 115, particularly on such short notice. As you mentioned, Gail, he's only 22. Young body, right? So he has room to fill out. And again, yeah.
Well,
this is a gamble worth
one
taking.
other thing that's worth mentioning, when a guy takes a fight like this on short notice, assuming he's well trained physically and ready, he doesn't have time to stew over it in his head. He has no time to get worried about it, and he's young enough to sort of be naive about it, to just
young and dumb enough, yeah.
Young and dumb, right? He's not going to psych himself out. He doesn't have the experience or the lead up time to let that happen. That is absolutely in his favor.
Quick word on this. I should have mentioned it during the news segment, but I failed to. Didn't hit my mind now until we talked about this fight. Rungvisai Cuadras was supposed to fight. The winner of that was supposed to fight the winner of Estrada Chocolatito 3. Quick word on this. Estrada is out from that fight, had to withdraw because he contracted COVID. Now it looks like Chocolatito is going to fight Julio Cesar Martinez, WBC champion at 112 pounds. He's moving up to 115 to fight Chocolatito. Quick word from the panel here. Your thoughts on that fight? On paper, it looks to be a firecracker of a fight. I have my opinions on who's going to win, I would lean towards Roman at this point, but quick word on that development as well.
Nah, it's a great fight, and actually, these last-minute replacements that for these matchroom cards have been so far, and you can argue the case. Some of these have been some better fights being made out of all of this, actually. And looking forward to that Estrada fight. And imagine this: we all had plans on seeing, the winner of this Estrada. This Estrada Chocolatito fight was going to face the winner of this Cuadras fight. And all of that, thanks to COVID being fired of the year again, scrapped all of that or even pushed it back. Imagine now at this point, instead of later on in the year, we get to fight between Julio Cesar Martinez versus Bam Rodriguez instead. That's what's the possibility that once everything falls out, which I think is really, really intriguing. And also the future of boxing, because I love Cuadras too. I think Cuadras guys, honestly, personally, to back up your opinion, Mike, I think Cuadras at this point is shot. So I'm with you on this whole Bam Rodriguez train. It's a matter of if and when personally. But yeah, it's not bad. I'm actually looking forward to all this stuff. It's good stuff.
Yep. Exactly. Like you mentioned into it, Cuadras, he's been long in the tooth when it comes to some of the fights he's endured, particularly the Chocolatito fight and the first Rambasai fight. That took a lot out of him. And it could be running for a young kid like Bam to come in where he doesn't have to drain his weight as much as he has to go to 108. Maybe that means he'll have more power and he may hurt Cuadras a little bit more. So I'm definitely with you, Mike, when it comes to this Bam Rodriguez train. The Martinez situation, who would have thought at this fight where we were getting the trilogy of your fight of the year, and from the technical standpoint, was the fight of the year in 2021. How lucky do you get a replacer for Nata Martinez? A kid who's ready. It's just one weight down. And eventually you kind of knew whether these people fall play, he was going to be next, no matter what. So he's getting that early shot. And if Roman wants to make sure that this renaissance that he's had post-Rungosai works out, this is going to be a hell of a fight. And I would not be surprised if it winds up being another Chocolatito Gallo 1 situation.
Take note, everybody over 115 pounds. These guys do not duck each other. These guys deliver. They bet on themselves. They believe in themselves. The fact is, they have to, and it's just their ethos. It's just their mentality. When you're an athlete, when you're a really talented athlete, and you've inherited the DNA of a guy who's never going to get bigger than 125 pounds, your options are limited, right? If you're going to be 6'4", 220, there's a lot of ways or taller. You got a lot of big money options. These guys, they could pretty much be boxers, jockeys, a lot of them.
Horse jockeys.
Horse jockeys, if you're from Latin America, is the other. Maybe you're a gymnast or swimmer or diver or something, but except for a rare few, there's not a whole lot of money there. So what are you going to do? And thank God they've got this avenue to perform. Martinez, it's a great contest. I don't think the weight difference is going to be anything because Roman is not a big 115. That's not ever been his best weight class, actually, in his career. He's performed much better at 108 and 112, which just shows you how good he is because he's still damn great at 115.
Yeah.
It's not his best weight class. This is a gamble for Roman. It really is. And he could have easily said, I don't want to jeopardize that third fight with Estrada by doing this. But to my knowledge, he didn't hesitate for a second. So the rest of the boxing world, you should learn a little something from these guys. They've got a lot bigger heart than the rest of you all.
Right. And going to be a women's title fight on the undercard of this as well. Jimmy Mitchell putting up her WBA bantamweight title against Carla Skelly. We'll gonna admit that right now. We'll talk more about that next week in our recap. let's move to the UK, right? Talked a lot about in our discussion about Taylor and Serrano. Claressa Shields' name was mentioned after after fighting in MMA for much of 2021. Right? She tiptoed. She kind of tipped in the waters in terms of there. Unfortunately for her, she lost her last MMA bout. She's making her return to the sweet science, fighting Emma Kozin, uh, BCBA IBF 160-pound belts on the line. Kind of a setup situation for Shields, Marquise. The plan is, should she win, she moves on to fight Savannah Marshall at some point in 2021. Do you think that Kozin gives her any problems here? Shields, of course, signing a deal with Sky. This fight is taking place in Wales. Do you think Kozin poses any kind of trouble for the self-proclaimed Walt?
No, and this is a stay busy for Claressa to get her feet wet back into the ring after being out in PFL for the last 6 months, and it's one of those things with her where she just honestly with Claressa Shields, guys, I've gotten to that point where if she's not facing Savannah Marshall again, like these are personally for me non-events. Like, I mean, you can pick up all the vacant belts you want. I mean, they're because they're available. That's why it's like that's kind of all this is. This another thing to keep everybody moving, but. No, I'm looking forward to seeing this Shields Marshall matchup, which I think is expected to happen sooner or later. Really looking forward to seeing this fight card, guys. That now that the UK and the Europe can actually get boxing because it's February and not January no more. We can see what our friends across the pond are actually looking at for fight cards now, and that should ramp up. But this is going to be interesting because this is the first one on the first one on Sky with that whole boxer thing. That this is their whole promotion. We've seen over the pandemic how some of these pro bellum cards look, so now this is their turn. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that all shakes out again. But this Shields fight, Michael, it's a non-event, man. Let me know when she's fighting Savannah Marshall.
Also on this card, Daniel, you have Chris Eubank Jr. Returning to the ring to fight former world title challenger Beefy Williams. Eubank Jr. He's kind of in that middleweight picture with the Charlos, with the Andrades, with the Golovkins and whatnot. He's in that mix. Has never distinguished himself, in my opinion, right? But he's still there, and he's still a name, and because he's a name, he's still in the picture. There's some money there with him. Your thoughts on this fight between Eubank Jr. and Williams? Excuse me.
Oh, don't forget, he's also isn't he still technically the IBO super middleweight champion? Still,
yeah, I think he has. Well, the WBA's fixed that thing up. I don't know if he has a WBA belt still. So
no, I don't think he has WBA belt, but I mean like the IBO belt, like the belt that actually is probably going to wind up being a big sanctioning body in the next decade. But this is going to be an interesting fight because the thing with Eubanks is he needs to keep his name in the headlines in order for him to try to land a big fight. Obviously, trying to lure Saunders back into it, that's not going to happen with the injury that he's had. Not for a while. You are a long shot, and I mean long shot of the Canelo sweepstakes. Short of Canelo, just wanted to say, I just want some UK money. I want some British pounds. And quite frankly, like his last few outings, they haven't been that impressive.
Mm-hmm.
They've been mid. And unfortunately, at that point, this probably is one of the better opponents for him in Liam Williams. Somebody who not too good, but not too bad himself, but has been serviceable at least in his last few fights. So this would be a good test as far as to see what Eubank has left in the tank. Because I think the day and if anybody gives this to Eubank Senior, please give him this word. I think the days of Eubanks Jr. actually drawing pay-per-view level money anywhere in the world are over.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
pay-per-view, maybe in England, but nowhere else. And is Roy Jones in his corner for this fight? Does anyone know?
I haven't seen Eubank and Roy Jones since that one god awful Twitter video I saw online where he was doing that dance thing where they're doing that weird like T-Rex kind of movement kind of going, I guess, to help improve his footwork. So I have no clue.
Jesus, yeah.
You know, the deal is this card isn't intended for American audiences. It's
not at all.
a UK card. Claressa's fight is set up only to familiarize herself with British fans. So when she does fight Marshall, she's a bigger draw. Her opponent looks good on paper. Dig into that box rec and look who she's faced. She's from Slovenia, Eastern European fighter. Yeah, she's faced absolute lineup of nobody.
Favorable opposition, as I like to call it.
Oh, just the worst. So this is tailor-made matchup that looks great on paper, and Claressa will be able to make her return, shake it off without a whole lot of pressure. And yeah, we've got other fish to fry here in the United States. It's not like we're lacking for a lot of choices this weekend. And you know, it's an embarrassment of riches. You know, everybody loaded up because we're in between, you know, playoffs and Super Bowl. So sort of, you know, nobody thinks the Pro Bowl is going to be any sort of competition.
You're right on that.
So, you know, we've got to load up on fight cards this weekend because nobody wants to have anything, you know,
Super Bowl weekend
next weekend to speak of. And then, folks, we are off to the races for the spring with loads and loads of fights lining up the schedule. I would think we'll start getting fight announcements again, you know, in the next couple of weeks, taking us right through and just past the Cinco de Mayo weekend. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
8 pay-per-views.
Well,
between
that and the fact that we all know that the NFL right now wants everybody to be talking Super Bowl instead of talking everything that happened today. Yeah, it's good to get the boxing out of the way before, because we don't know what Super Bowl weekend is going to be like, especially after today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of these who don't know what Daniel's talking about, the retirement of Brady, first and foremost, and other things. So, I think we're going to start to shut the show down on that note. If you like what you've heard live here on YouTube, please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure to click that subscribe button as well. For those who are checking out the show on podcast platforms, audio podcast platforms like Apple Podcast, Anchor, Google Podcast, Spotify, anywhere and everywhere else in between, make sure you follow what's there. If you're listening to us on Apple, please make sure to leave a review. 5-star review will get read on the show. Going to go around the panel here. Though we didn't begin the show with ladies first, we're going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News and Whyte Fights, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media, because you do teach media on the side. For those who want to check you out on TMZ Live occasionally, let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find my regular preview recap column at Communities Digital News, which is COMMDIGI News.com. Man, tell it's already been a week when I can't even spell the name. And I am a compatriot of Marquis with the crew, the growing crew and lineup at nyfights.com. And we got a lot of shit to cover this weekend, Marquis. We
do.
And I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially as it pertains to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99, RAWKUZ99. Yeah, no, we definitely do talk a little bit of wrestling. I think on Thursday it's gonna be me and Bill hook up again, and some things happen, some things don't, and ultimately we're gonna see how it shapes up. And now that Gail mentioned it, I would not be surprised if a particular announcement got made in Pro Bowl weekend.
Indeed, indeed. And I'll go to last but certainly not least, Marquise from NY Fights. For those who want to talk to Sweet Science or anything else, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Absolutely, Michael. Thanks so much, man, for having me on as always, man. nyfights.com is where you can find my shenanigans and writings. Put a piece up this evening, actually, on the this Don King card. I had to cover it over the weekend, and I had to be sober for the entire thing. So I wrote about it extensively.
Man, that's asking a lot, man.
Yeah, I listen. There's no way. But nonetheless, you can catch my shenanigans and hijinks there. Also on Twitter, I'm always active on there, always harassing people, questioning everyone and everything, because that's what you do on the internet. I mean, the app's Baker, right? At Weak Sauce Radio. You can catch me there. Working on as well a couple of things for the weekend, since it's a big fight weekend over at New York Fights. Outside of that, you can just catch me there or on the internet. I say all the time, guys, I'm not hard to find, and don't find me before I find you.
For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. Also, you can check out my work over at Three Kings Boxing, your source for boxing information. Shout out to the crew over there. The head man of Three Kings 2K, head of media relations, prior guest on the show, Bo, lead writer Bakari, fellow senior writer Jarrell, aka Big Cool, editor Red. Again, threekingsboxing.com, your latest source for boxing information. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to check out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog/site is the place to go to. P4pboxingreport.com. Again, if you want to email us with comments, questions, whatever, good or bad, if you can do so at P4P Boxing at P4P Boxing Report. On the site, you'll find links to what follows all over the socials, Facebook, Twitter, IG, YouTube, Tumblr, where you can donate, and also link to Beachbody on Demand. I strongly suggest you check out or take advantage of the 2-week free trial that runs concurrent throughout the year. Free access for 2 weeks to all programs on Beachbody on Demand. Check out the 10-round boxing programs for those who are looking for a boxing-based program or any and everything else. On the next episode, we will recap. Excuse me right quick. We will recap Thurman and Barrios. We will recap Santa Cruz, his fights, his return against Keenan Carbajal. We will also recap the fight between Cuadras and Jesse Bam Rodriguez. We didn't talk about it here, but we also will recap Jamie Mitchell and her title defense against Skelly. We'll also discuss Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Williams, Claressa Shields bout. And we will do a preview of, it's going to be light on the 12th, one main fight to talk about, the return of Daniel Jacobs fighting John Ryder. I mean, come on, Jacobs, you can do better than that. Come on. I just had to say that. John Ryder, really? Yeah, the snoring sound. The snoring sound is appropriate, Marquis. The snoring sound is very appropriate. So yeah, that's
What the hell happened to Daniel Jacobs? Tune in next week. We'll try.
How was John Ryder
No,
on these main events?
I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened. He got that $10-12 million in the fight against Canelo, and he was basically, he's been content ever since. That's what happened to him.
The Canelo, yeah, the whole
Canelo effect, yeah.
Sheets principle. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
That's pretty much what happens there. So we will talk about all of those fights. So thank everybody who is checking us out live, or will check us out later once I get this up on the regular podcast platforms. For Gail for Communities, Digital News, and NY Fights. For Marquise of NY's Fights. For Daniel of For Boxing News in the Inscriber. Again, this has been episode 351 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. I'm your host, Michael. We'll see you next time. Everyone have a good evening, good night, and happy Black History Month.